So we'll go ahead and get started. So hopefully everyone is here for the preseason coaches webinar for powerlifting for this coming season. We appreciate you again taking your time this evening to join us. We have some good information, but tonight we do have myself. I'm Steve Bennett, Senior Director of Sports and Competition with the Community Program here at Special Mix, Maryland. I think I know everyone, but just in case wanted to introduce myself. We also have Derek Willis. If Derek, you want to raise your hand. He is our venue director and our go-to expert in the sport of powerlifting. And Ryan Kelchner, our sports director and lead from the state office with the sport of powerlifting. So we'll go through and show you the agenda here that we'll get through this evening. We'll talk about updates with COVID protocol with Special Mix Maryland. Again, the welcome and introductions we already taken care of. And again, thank you all the coaches who have joined us this evening. Ryan will then get into some specifics in regards to deadlines and timelines for this coming season, when to get your forms in and to make sure all that's submitted to the area program so that we have it in time and by the deadlines that we will post tonight. Talk about the events, some sports specific and rule reminders, talk about some coaches trainings, and then at the end, we'll see if there's any questions. So again, we thank you for joining us, and we'll go right into the updates with COVID protocol after I do the introductions. Again, our sports management team, just to acknowledge the individuals who serve in that capacity and help us with powerlifting and looking at how we can improve, what topics we need to address, emphasize that type of thing. So Jim Downs, a coach from Montgomery County, who is also our powerlifting coach at the USA Games in Orlando this past June. Kathy Barrett from Howard County, who was our coach for powerlifting at the 2018 USA Games. Kenny Long, who was a competitor at the USA Games, also from Howard County. Derek, who I've already talked about, and Ryan. So we get into the COVID protocol. So as we look at this, I want to emphasize that all of these updates and new protocols that we'll talk about is based on communications and feedback and meetings that we've had with all of our area and county leadership and area county directors, with some coaches that we've pulled into that communication and that discussion, as well as staff members here at the state office. We also have a return to play task force who was involved in the decision making, our legal counsel, and then we always involve our athlete leadership council as well, who represent the athletes from around the state. So with that being said, Special Mix Maryland and the protocols that we will follow from this point moving forward for the fall season are what we've done basically this past spring and summer season. Is we are looking at the restrictions as they are already written by the state of Maryland or your county, and also the training facilities, whether it's a gym or a high school or wherever that you guys may train in. So whichever one is the most restrictive, that's what we want to follow. With that being said, right now, previously, like you all know, if you were involved last year, we had a requirement for all individuals within powerlifting, including volunteers, et cetera, to be vaccinated and fully vaccinated. We have lifted that restriction for this coming season. So vaccinations will not be required to participate in powerlifting or in any sports at this time, or for overnight stays. And that goes through the bowling, 10-pin bowling season this coming fall and winter this coming fall. Bowling fits into the fall season. So for those of you who may be involved with coaching other sports, again, this is what we're following for the fall season. It will be reviewed for those of you who also get involved with other winter sports, such as what we do, alpine, snowshoeing, basketball. It may be extended through that time as well. We will always continue to monitor the situations as it comes up, but this is what we will have in place moving forward in the fall season. So we'll also talk about return to participation if someone does test positive or has symptoms or shows symptoms. And and get into that information as well. But we're continuing to accept if those people who haven't been vaccinated in the past or want to submit vaccination forms that they haven't in the previously, we're still accepting those and recording those and putting those in our database. So again, it doesn't mean if you haven't submitted one, just hold on to it. We'll gladly take that for our records so that we have that moving forward if anything changes. So this next slide, again, Ryan, we are recording this webinar, and we'll also send you guys the recording of this as well as the slide deck so that you have it as a reference. So returning to participation if someone had tested positive or have shown symptoms. Previously, Special Mix Maryland has required that you either have a doctor's note or you can provide a negative test. That is no longer a requirement from Special Mix Maryland. But we do have to follow the CDC recommendations and guidelines for isolation and masking. We do provide the link here, again, that you will have moving forward. I'm sure some of you have checked that out on occasion throughout the COVID pandemic over the last 2 years or so. But it does talk about if someone tested positive or has shown symptoms, and what the guidelines and protocols are for that regarding, staying at home for 5 days, isolate yourself from anybody who may be more at risk for contracting COVID, wearing a mask, and then again, when you can return to activities. So all of that is listed here for your reference. So that you have that if any questions arise from anybody within your training program with powerlifting. But you can also always check with your area leadership. But this will also be posted on our coaches resource page on our website, so you have that as a quick reference. Or it can also direct other family members, athletes, other coaches to that page so they can see it firsthand, and it's not just something that you're telling them verbally. So with that being said, we also know that there's varying viewpoints and mindsets regarding the pandemic and COVID. So again, this is the Special Olympics protocols and guidelines we will follow. As you talk to other athletes, volunteers, family members, coaches, anybody involved with Special Olympics, we want them to continue to make the best decisions in the best interest and for their own comfort and their well-being. However, we will enforce the protocols as the return to play kind of stuff. But again, for the most part, we're just following the CDC, and we will enforce those if there's any impositions that come on based on either, again, the state, the county government, or the facilities in which you train. And again, most restrictive. So if the state of Maryland and Howard County says nothing's going on, don't worry about anything, don't need to wear a mask, don't need to be vaccinated to go into this facility. But your training facility says anybody touching our equipment has to be vaccinated, or you have to wear your mask at all times within the facility, you abide by those most restrictive restrictions. So always check with your facility, see if anything has changed, etc. And again, while we're removing some of the restrictions we've had in place previously, we do recommend and encourage individuals to talk with their doctors or their physicians or caregivers about receiving the vaccinations and boosters moving forward. So again, we do encourage that. And again, just talk with the health providers so that everyone's in good standing there with their health and well-being moving forward. And just a reminder, this is something we put on every webinar. This should not be a surprise to anybody, but just a reminder, no athlete, volunteer, etc. can participate in any time without the proper and valid certifications in place. So I know in years ago, it was, hey, just give me your medical form whenever you get it, come on to practice and come on to training, or, hey, we'll get that form later, don't worry about it. Again, extremely critical and crucial that you guys talk with any individuals who within your training program and have all of those forms and certifications in hand before anybody practices or trains or anything within your program. So for athletes, that's the medical form that you guys should all have as coaches on whenever you're practicing or training in case anything happens. You have that as a reference. And also the CDW, which is the Communicable Disease Waiver Form. And for other volunteers, et cetera, it's the volunteer application, your protective behaviors, certification, coaches, sport-specific training, again, depending on your role, and we'll have a slide here in a minute that gives some more detail with that. But again, there's no exceptions to that, guys. Really critical that we follow through and have those precursor meetings, if you will, before you have your first practice or training, make sure everything's in place. And, just work with your area leadership. They have the information there available. If there's any questions about what forms have been submitted, we also post some of that information on our website so that there's information there as a reference. But again, really can't overemphasize enough to have those conversations, whether you do a sign up for individuals who have an interest in participating in powerlifting. You can get back to them and say, before you come to a practice, all of this information or these forms or whatever need to be in our hands in order to let you through the door. Otherwise, unfortunately, we're going to have to say, great, glad you came. Can't let you do anything today. Go home, get that form, send it in. We welcome you with open arms at the next one, provided that information is in our hands prior to them arriving. So here's kind of what I was explaining earlier, a little bit more detailed of what different individuals will need from their certification perspective. So you see the athletes, it's basically the medical form and the CDW, or the Communicable Disease Waiver. Then you talk about our unified teammates, which we don't have in powerlifting at this time, but general volunteers helping out with the program. They have their protective behaviors and their background check. General sport volunteers, then they also have the concussion certification. Again, always looking in the wealth or the health and safety of our athletes, also the wealth of the organization. So if anyone wants to donate, let me know. We have our assistant coaches. And again, that's the sport certification that they will have as far as the assistant coach sport certification. And then the head coach, which is the sport specific, as well as coaching Special Olympics, et cetera. And again, in our resources at the very end of this, goes into more detail on that. But just to be clear on the head coaches, the sport certification doesn't just mean I've been trained in the sport of powerlifting. In addition to that, your head coach sport certification has one or two other things. Like I said, this coaching Special Olympics athletes is a course that you need and must take to be certified as a head coach, where an assistant coach doesn't necessarily need that. So we talked about the Communicable Disease Waiver Form, right? A couple years ago, we had something in place that was similar, but it was called the Acknowledgement of Risk. We've had a few of those trickle in, people who have not really been active since COVID began and are now coming back. They're aware of that form and they found it somewhere. The Acknowledgement of Risk, or the AOR form, is obsolete, not valid. We'll get it, we'll throw it right in the trash. So the replacement of that form is the CDW, or the Communicable Disease Waiver Form. Again, we have that on our coaches resource page. Your county leadership has it. There's no reason that you can't find it or whatever. If you have an issue with it, your area leadership can't help you out. Go to our website, go to the coaches portion, and it's listed there. Last resort, you can reach out to Ryan and say, hey, where was that again? But again, just emphasize, don't even mention the AOR. You don't want to confuse anybody, but if you get one that says Acknowledgement of Risk and not the Communicable Disease Waiver, just know that is not a replacement. That doesn't serve any purpose in our organization any longer. Obsolete, gone. Okay. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ryan here to talk about some deadlines and when forms and everything need to be in place. The one thing we always do indicate and emphasize here as coaches, what you see here as the deadline is not your deadline to get it to your area leadership. That's the area leadership's deadline to make sure it's in our hands at the state office. So you see the little asterisk under the second column of when. In each one of those situations, we have a little asterisk there that says, due to your area leadership a week or two prior to that date, so that they have time to look it over, make sure it's valid, and then submit it to us so that we can get it into our records by the date that's on this slide. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ryan, and he will continue with some additional information for you. And Ryan, you're mute. Yep, there you go.
Unmuting is good. I appreciate everyone who's joined us tonight. Steve, if you could just monitor the chat, there's nothing in there right now. But we'll jump into some deadlines related to the season for powerlifting. So the training registration deadline, as you can see here, is September 7th. That's when your roster needs to be entered into GMS. So that's going to include all your athletes, unified partners, coaches, volunteers, anybody within your delegation. Anybody submitted after that date may participate in the season, but will not be eligible for the state competition. So again, we like doing these webinars early to give you guys these deadlines well in advance to provide ample time, both for you as coaches and your area leadership to get these different deadlines completed before the deadline.
And one of the things I'll stress there is, we've had some, I will say some hiccups, if you will, in the past where coaches just concentrate primarily on the athletes, or in some sports, the unified teammates and themselves. But this also goes to anybody else who's coming to help as an assistant coach or a sport volunteer. Want to make sure that we have everybody in that system at that time, so we're not scrambling at the last minute, which we will not do any longer, to get those forms in once those deadlines have passed. So again, that's anybody, like Ryan said, anybody on your roster, not just the competitors and yourself as a coach, but anybody coming to support powerlifting in a volunteer capacity, not spectators, but anybody coming officially as part of your program within powerlifting.
Thanks, Steve. The last date for missing forms to be submitted, which is the slide that Steve covered 2 ago, is going to be September 16th. So depending on which role you are within your program, your forms and certifications need to be updated through the state championship date, which is October 22nd. So no matter which role you are, please make sure that your certifications are up to date through that time. Again, that's September 16th that those missing forms need to be in to proceed there. The competition registration deadline is October 3rd. That's when your delegation members and your team rosters, including their events, need to be entered into GMS. And we'll go into that a little bit more as we go through these slides here. But anybody without those events in GMS, we scratch and take them out and assume that they will not be participating at the state competition. One other note here that you'll see that soccer is not held at the Mount, but at any of your soccer athletes who may also be participating in that sport, that needs to be, their certifications need to go through October 30th, which is when that competition will take place. So moving on to the powerlifting events here, we have 3 different ones: the bench press, the deadlift, and the double combination, which is the bench press and the deadlift. So an athlete is required to compete in the bench and the deadlift if they want to qualify for the combination lift. So an athlete's final award is calculated by adding the 2 of them together, assuming they are successful. So say an athlete does the 3 bench presses, but is not able to complete any lifts for the deadlift, they will not be able to compete in the combination event. So again, as you already know as coaches, make sure that that first lift, their opening lift, is something that they can complete. So they have the highest chance of being able to both move up in those weights, but also compete in the combination event there. With qualifying competitions, what is the point of a qualifying competition? That's a very important aspect of the sports season. We want our athletes to be competing against other counties. That will both push them to lift more and kind of go to the best of their ability there. So we want to have athletes competing against others, and that also gets them ready for the state championship. But with that being said, we also don't want that culminating event to be their only competition aspect of their season. So we want to have those competitions throughout the year, and we'll talk about that a little bit more here shortly also. So in order to count as a qualifying competition, it must emulate the state level competition. and follow the rules of Special Olympics and the national governing body here. There's safety aspects that need to be adhered to. Medical personnel need to be on site for each of these qualifiers. That's extremely important. If you have any issues with that, please contact me in advance, or maybe include that on your sanction form and I can work with you there, but that's very important. We also want to have appropriately trained, certified judges and officials there to make sure the rulings are accurate. And ideally, we want to include 3 or more counties during these qualifiers. That does not mean that during your practice session, you can't swap one of those out, which I know counties typically do that and call it an in-house qualifier with just your program. But we do want to encourage you for one of your qualifiers to have other counties in attendance for the reasons that we talked about above. When you are going to have those qualifiers, and this will be explained a little bit more in detail when the email goes out this week with this recording and the slide deck, we'll talk about sanction forms. They need to be submitted to your area director at least 30 days in advance. And then when that happens, they will sign off on it. We want them to be kept in the loop with everything that's going on as they oversee your program. And they will then send that to us. That'll be posted on the coach's resource page. So again, it kind of goes back to always checking that page. Is probably once a week would be great, just to see what those opportunities are. Also with that same topic, there is a intent to attend form that'll be on the website if it's not already, that kind of gives us a heads up. And then we can talk to the host county of who also is interested in attending, assuming that one of those qualifiers is open to other counties.
Ryan, we did have a question come in,
Yes.
from Javier. And Derek, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think for the purpose of where we have, I know calibrated and certified weights can be a challenge at times to get a hold of. So, you know, that's something we can talk to you about, but we can make accommodations with that. The thing is to have that competitive experience. And, you know, hopefully those weights are in kilograms, but we can have conversion charts if we need to. Derek, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think just for the qualifier, it doesn't necessarily need to be calibrated set of weights or bars or even like the official style of racks.
Yeah.
So if you're just having it at like a CrossFit gym and they happen to have the metal plates, just like standard or York 45s or something like that. For the qualifier, I think it's fine. Just I would say any kind of records that you're trying to set would be ineligible without the calibrated weights. But for qualifiers, I think it's fine.
Yeah, and I think the important thing there also is to when you submit a sanction form that indicates you're looking to host a qualifying event, is indicate that in the notes section, so that we can inform others of, hey, it's going to be in pounds. When you submit your opening lifts or whatever else, we need them in pounds at this event, although we'll do kilograms at the state championships, etc. But again, it's more so that the same set of weights are being used by each competitor, so it's a fair competition. Does that answer your question, Javier?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for the question. Back to you, Ryan.
Alrighty, moving forward here. Next, qualifying for the state tournament, a little bit more details on that. They need to meet all the training and registration requirements and deadlines. We just do a double check to make sure that everybody participating is in fact up to date. So please make sure, again, before your training season even starts, that all those forms are up to date, so athletes can attend those opportunities. For powerlifting, complete a minimum of 1 sanctioned qualifying event. That is the baseline for powerlifting specifically. And again, this is the minimum. We want to offer our athletes as many opportunities to compete as we can throughout the season. Typically in the past, we've worked together pretty well to offer opportunities in different areas of the state for our athletes. And I hope we can continue to offer that. I know it's been a little bit more difficult recently, but there's some places that Derek's aware of. We found that CrossFit gyms are kind of great for reservation purposes, or kind of back rooms of gyms to offer things for our athletes here. One other thing at the bottom here, Athletes must participate in the events they intend to compete at Fall Fest. I think that's obvious, but there are other lifts like the squat, et cetera, that will benefit our athletes during our training, which Derek will go into information more during our sport-specific training in a few weeks from now. But please make sure athletes are obviously doing the bench and the deadlift consistently during their practice sessions.
Yeah, and with the squat, as Ryan mentioned, we are continuing to look at offering additional events, not just within powerlifting but other sports. Squat, as you guys all well know, or most of you all well know, is a little bit more different and a little bit more specialized lift, as well as spotters and things of that nature. We're not looking to offer that this fall, possibly in the future. But again, if you're looking to do some of those additional activities, make sure that you get trained by Derek or others. Don't just say, hey, we're going to go ahead and do the squat. If you don't know the dynamics of the event and that discipline, don't just go into it willy-nilly. Check with Derek, check with Ryan, make sure you have, because it can be extremely dangerous as well. So anyway, just wanted to point that out. Great. Back to you, Ryan.
Great point. Thank you, Steve. So with our sanctioned qualifying events currently, I know we're offering this webinar a little bit farther in advance than we have in the past, but we like to get these deadlines and some rough season planning to you to kind of get the juices flowing in the brain here about our season. There's no sanction forms that I've received at this time. I've heard some rumors about some things that will be offered. If you are aware of any of them currently, though, even if you don't have the time or anything like that, if you have a date and location, if you want to drop that in chat, that would be helpful, just so if people email or call and they're wondering about opportunities, that I can provide them with some direction, assuming that is an event that's open to other counties. So again, on that sanction form, please make sure you fill out everything in its entirety. It makes both of our lives easier if we're not tracking each other down to figure out some last details on those pages. As you'll see at the bottom here, the pre-competition webinar will be October 6th, if you want to jot that down, from 7 to 8:30 p.m. And that'll be specifically related to the state competition at Mount St. Mary's. The registration link is under that, but it'll also be sent out to you a few weeks in advance also of that webinar. So the coaches training, Derek and I met last week to talk through these details a little bit. I will say that don't ask to meet Derek in person, because you'll end up at his house and he'll put you through a lifting session that you were unprepared for. But we are still working on those details. They will be sent to you once we have them finalized. We are looking to have that in person. Derek is willing to lead that training. The sport-specific information, I'll touch on a few Special Olympics reminders during that training, most likely looking at a CrossFit gym, just so we can reserve it and have that time specifically for you as coaches to have hands-on training. We think that offering that in person with Derek leading that will be the most beneficial approach here for this season. Looking to Fall Sports Festival here, the state competition for powerlifting, Saturday, October 22nd, as we talked about earlier, with when all those forms need to be through. Again, we'll be back at the Mount. Looking forward to continuing that partnership with them. Happy to be back at that location. It works really well for our athletes, and we're familiar with it, which of course makes everything a little bit easier all around. Approximately, we're looking at 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., but that'll of course kind of depend on how many athletes we have, et cetera, but we will have a better guess on that as we become closer to the competition. Please make sure that all your submissions are in kilograms. That makes a very big difference on the day. We are in no rush to get out of there. It is a great day for our athletes to compete, but we don't want to be sitting around converting all of that in the morning. So please do my team and I a favor and make sure that those are in kilograms during your submission. I might have some form that says confirming in kilograms that you check or just say yes. Last year was great with that, and it made a very big difference with how that competition day went. We ideally have USAPL officials. They've been great in the past, and we look forward to having many of them back again. But as we get closer, of course, you'll receive more information over email, but also in the pre-competition webinar.
Hey, Ryan.
Yes, Derek.
I did leave my email with the Maryland State Director for USAPL, and he's going to let me know if there's any judges that are going to be freed up on that date.
Perfect. Thank you very much. That's huge. And I know that Chip was trying to do some work with that also. Some rules, the Special Olympic sport rules for powerlifting govern all of our competitions. Those are based off the IPF and the United States Powerlifting Association rules. In case you're wondering where our set of rules that we follow come from. Those are also 2 links that will take you to their sites. Both are updated as of this year and are nice. I don't know if I would refer to them for training programs. I would go through Derek with that or some other resources, but it is helpful if you're looking for sport-specific information, rule-wise, related to powerlifting. So some rule reminders here. If you remember back in 2019, if you were a coach then or in any other role within powerlifting, our rules change request to allow the 15-pound bar for both events was denied at the international level, but the National Powerlifting Committee approved the use of that bar for the bench press only. We have implemented that into our competition at the Mount, and we'll continue to do so this year. The programs are encouraged to use that bar when needed, if available. There's a few athletes that I'm aware of that use that, but not too many. But please do not feel a reason not to use that bar during training or during your qualifying events, as this will also be available at the state competition.
And just as a clarifier there, the National Powerlifting Committee approved the 15-kilogram bar, but not the 15-pound bar, I think, is what's happened. But we, like Ryan said, we continue to advocate to allow the 15-pound bar as a rule change proposal to the International Special Olympics Office for their consideration. Continue to get denied, and that's okay. But we, as a organization, have some leeway there to implement some rules locally. So again, with our sport committee, as we talked about earlier, over the many years that we've been offering powerlifting, this is something they believe allows a few other additional athletes to participate using the 15-pound bar. So we'll continue to move forward with that as we have in the past.
I appreciate the
just so everybody is aware of what the difference is for the coaches. A 15-kilo bar is a 35-pound bar. It's considered what's called a women's bar in CrossFit and Olympic weightlifting. So it, in addition to being a little bit shorter, it is thinner, which is why they're allowing it on the bench and not the deadlift, because it gives it a little bit of an advantage for your grip on the deadlift. So the bench doesn't really matter about the grip size, but you do get a better grip on it on the deadlift. So that's why they're not allowing it.
Awesome. Thank you, Derek. Some other rule reminders here. Athletes must be 16 years old to participate in powerlifting. None of these other rules are new, but we will still go through them. Chalk is permitted on the hands. Powder is only permitted on certain areas of the body, though. Only athletes and one coach can be on the lifting stage. Typically, that coach is the one to help with the lift off of that as the athlete's completing their lift. But again, that should only be the athlete and the coach on that stage, along with the officials that are officiating that event. Lifters have 1 minute to initiate a lift. Additional time up to a total of 3 minutes is allowed with physical disabilities, but that must be sent to me in advance just so I have note of it and I can inform my team and have that in our system as we're going through the competition day. If you're having a qualifier and that accommodation needs to be made, I do not need to be noted in advance of that. Feel free to do so if you feel inclined. But that will be strictly for the state championship on my end here as a very helpful piece. If the weights are dropped unintentionally, it will be declared no lift and the lifter may be DQ'd. Again, so if they accidentally drop it, that is not a problem. Our officials are relatively lenient on that, but if it is intentionally dropped, that will result in a DQ. Some rule reminders here continued on uniform requirements. I'd encourage you to look through the sport rules that we have from SOI as they go into a little bit more detail here. These are just some general things. But in the rules, they have sizes for each of these. The things can be either too big or too small. So the lifting suit, an undershirt is required, briefs, foot gear, which includes socks. A lifting belt is optional. I know that's a big part of our coaches training. We go into that, and there are certain sizes that those can and cannot be. If you have any questions on that, feel free to email me about them or email Derek directly, because that's who I'll most likely be forwarding it to if I cannot find an answer in the rules there. Wraps, then substances, only baby powder, pool hall chalk, liquid chalk, resin, all those other things are permitted. The use of oil, grease, or other lubricants are forbidden though. We do offer a chalk station at the state championship. I know that many gyms have those too that you may be having your qualifying events at. Some resources here. The Fall Fest event guide is posted both on its own individual resource page, but the information related to powerlifting will be on the powerlifting page located at the bottom of that resource page. As we get more information regarding the schedule, venue map stuff, etc., which is helpful to look at in advance to kind of locate everything, that will be on the coach's resource page. Some other websites that we talked about before to check out if you're interested is the International Powerlifting Federation site, along with the USPA website listed here. As I typically tell people, if you check the coach's resource page once a week, you'll probably find new content on there each time that you look, specifically related to upcoming events. But it's just a great place to check in and see what's coming up, other opportunities. We try to post any new content that people pass along to us that may be beneficial during your coaches or during your training season on that main website there.
And one of the things I'll also stress there is the coach's website is public knowledge. I mean, it's on our website. It's not, I mean, anybody can access that. So again, as I was talking earlier about resources or COVID protocols or whatever else, you can direct family members there, athletes there, other volunteers you have, whatever. So again, there's no secret code as a coach you enter when you go to the coach's resource page on our website. Up at the top, it has a tab for coach. You hit coach and then coach resources. And then that'll take you to these pages. Again, just also to clarify, the event guide that Ryan had indicated there at the first tab, it's not posted yet. Once we get that posted, you know, again, that's why it's important to check back here and there, but nowhere near to providing a completed Fall Sports Festival event guide. But as we get closer to the event, we'll start posting things, and then hopefully a couple weeks out, we'll be able to post the full event guide. But as powerlifting goes, you can go to the powerlifting page and see any new information coming up there.
And we are at the question portion. There's no other ones that I see in chat, but I do want to give everybody 30 seconds or so. Feel free to unmute. We have some knowledgeable people here tonight. They can answer your question. I think there is one raised hand. I don't see who it is.
Yep.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Javier.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, just get clarification on the use of the other bar. So we do have a couple of athletes, and I think we're using an aluminum bar. It may be even lighter than the 35 pound. I think it might, or the 15, the 15 kilo. I think it might be 15 pounds. So am I to understand that in the Fall Fest, the state competition, that will not be used or not be allowed for either bench press or deadlift?
No, Javier. Are you with Howard County?
I am, yeah.
Yeah, no. The 15-pound bar as previously will be allowed at the state championships. So, and I don't know, I can't remember actually if we have one, but I do believe that we asked you guys to bring that as well to the state championships. So,
correct. Yeah, we brought it last year. Okay.
Yeah, no, we will allow that. It's just not allowed out. I mean, there may be other state programs who find themselves in that same predicament and may have also made the same judgment or the rule locally within their state to allow that. But outside of Special Mix Maryland, you know, just no guarantees, and most likely if they travel anywhere else to compete, that will not be allowed. But yeah, we'll allow
Roger.
it.
Okay, Roger, understood. Thank you.
You bet. And I'm assuming you don't have another question. Your hand's still raised. If you want to unraise, or Javier, if you have another question, go for it. Okay, gotcha. I see you unraised your hand, so that's good. I don't see any other questions or hands being raised, right?
I do not either. So as we said before, this will be sent out over email by Wednesday afternoon at the latest here. And I'll also have some other important documents. I'll attach a blank sanction form. So as you guys begin brainstorming, please send that to me. If you don't have all the details, just shoot me some of them over email if you're beginning that planning process. And then once you have all the details, 30 days or more out, please fill that form out in its entirety. I'll post it to the page so other people are aware of those opportunities as we move forward with the season. Again, Derek and I are going to plan a coaches training down the road here, not too far out, in person, to get everybody on board and answer your questions in more detail and have some hands-on time there. But please feel free to reach out to me with any questions you might have throughout the season, and I will make sure that one way or another, I get you the answer. I really appreciate everybody being on tonight and all that you do for our athletes, whether they say it or not. They truly, really appreciate it. And you're making a major impact in their life, providing them with these opportunities. So I look forward to working with everybody again tonight. Not just tonight, more than just tonight. With that being said, I'll pass it over to Steve to say some final closing statements. And I hope you guys have a great night.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. And again, if we go to the next slide, I think it's a thank you. And that's what Ryan was just saying there. And again, we understand many of you wear multiple hats, whether you're a family member, a coach for multiple sports, whatever. On behalf of Special Mix Maryland, Derek, Ryan, and the powerlifting sport management team, without you guys, the athletes don't have the opportunity to showcase their skills, grow, and flourish as athletes and as powerlifting individuals, and in their personal lives. So as coaches, we just recognize all of your efforts, your dedication to providing the good training and developing those skills for the athletes. And it's just awesome with you guys as leaders. The athletes look up to you. I'm sure some of you, if you're not family members already, feel as if you are family members. I jokingly say to our staff here and a lot of our management team, hey, we're family. We spend more time together than we do sometimes with our family. So again, without you guys, your dedication, we have no Special Olympics. So on behalf of the state office, your area and county leadership, appreciate your dedication and truly the love of the sport and the love of the organization. And what Ryan's going through here, again, as a resource, it just has additional information. It has some forms there that you can look to as a reference. It talks about, the medical certifications of your people who are coming to serve in that medical capacity at a qualifying event, things of that nature. It gives you examples of some of the forms. Again, this will be on the slide deck. It'll also be posted so that you can reference it at your own convenience. Or if you have any questions, please check the coach's website first, coach's resource page.